We can start, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. So we would like to welcome you to our First Day Forum series, the seminar you already know, most of you. We have a guest speaker today called Carla Valenzuela from the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico. And our chair is going to be Professor Araun Diaz from CISAT. As you all know, this forum is organized by the GRFDT in collaboration with the Center for Research on North America. And I will now pass the floor to Professor Araun Diaz, who will read the Carla's bio and chair the session. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much, Camelia, and the rest of the organizer for inviting me to this presentation. And I'm going to introduce our guest, is Carla Valenzuela. She graduated from the Immigration and Settlement Studies Master Program at the Ryerson University in Canada. She holds a PhD in Social and Political Science from Iberoamericana University, that is in Mexico. And she's currently a full-time professor at the same university in the International Studies Department, and also teaching the Master in Migration Studies program. She's also member of the Mexican National Research System and a founding partner of Laboratorio de Investigación Social, Justicia en Movimiento. It's a Mexican NGO. Okay, thank you very much. And Carla, it's your time. Go ahead. And then after her presentation, we're going to have a question from the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Araun Diaz and Camelia, for the invitation, and also colleagues from the GRFDT. Thank you very much for organizing this event. Just to make sure I don't run out of time, how much time do I have?
45 minutes to 1 hour to present.
Okay, it's more than enough then. Okay, so I don't know if Araun can help me with my presentation, because I don't have my computer right now available. Yes, thank you, Araun. So, well, thank you very much for everyone for joining us today. I will be talking about one of my research projects that I'm almost done with, and that I'm writing about, which has to do with immigrant entrepreneurship and the role of countries of origin. So I'm going to focus now in the Mexican case, and I will talk about Mexicans living in the US and how the Mexican consulates are actually helping them to become successful entrepreneurs. So I'm presenting this on behalf also of my co-author, which is Patricia Diaz. She is a student of the Masters in Migration Studies program at Iberoamericana University as well. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So basically, we have a very simple research question, which is, how do Mexican consulates become stakeholders of the entrepreneurial ecosystem for its diaspora in the US? So we wanted to actually see something different about consulates. I have been studying Mexican consulates in the US for quite a while now, but I had never actually studied what they do for other diaspora members that are not undocumented Mexicans in the US. There's a lot of studies that talk about how the Mexican consulate involves with undocumented Mexicans, but there's very little written regarding what Mexican consulates do with other diaspora members which do not necessarily have an irregular status. So we were curious about what other programs the Mexican consulates had in terms of helping out the Mexican diaspora that had an interest in entrepreneurship. Can we go to the next one? Yeah, thank you. So the background, a little bit of context, is that Mexican constitute the largest share of business owners among all migrant groups in the US. So around 18% of all business owners in the US are immigrants. And of those 18%, Mexican migrants that are entrepreneurs in the US constitute 1/3. So it is a very large number of entrepreneurs in the US. So we thought that, well, it's a community that's worth studying. Can we click once more, please, to get the next bullet point? Thank you. And also, when we talk about consulates, we see that the Mexican consulates in the US are the largest consular network in the world. So this means that no other country in the whole world has as many consulates in another single country as Mexico has in the US. We currently have 53 consulates in the US, and they do a lot of activities that are beyond the traditional consular protection. So when we talk about traditional consular protection, we're basically talking about what happens when your nationals get into trouble in another country, or when their rights are violated by the authorities in another country. That's basically like a very broad definition of what could be considered transnational protection. But when we talk about the cases of the Mexican consulates in the US, we see that they go beyond. We see that they do a lot of activities, like, for example, they do health prevention. They do health prevention campaigns. They also have a lot of programs called ventanillas, which in English is windows. And they are like stands in the consulate spaces that provide information regarding health, regarding educational opportunities. They have a special window, a special ventanilla only for women issues. They have recently opened also a window that caters for indigenous communities' needs. And they also have a program about financial education called Financial Education Program, which they launched in 2006, currently operating in over 50 of the 53 consulates, in almost all the consulates. So we're interested in looking what this financial education program is doing for the diaspora. In the beginning, in 2006, when this program was launched, the only objective of the program was to assist the diaspora to manage its economic resources. But now the financial education program has expanded, and it also helps people that want to become entrepreneurs with a lot of what involves being an entrepreneur in the US, like, for example, having solid networks, knowing about the tax system in the US, knowing about what is required to open a business, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, please? So basically what we're doing is a theoretical study, and we're looking at gray papers of consulates and also at the academic literature that touches upon 4 main topics. So we take literature from entrepreneurship, and we also take literature from diaspora studies as our 2 main topics. But we also, in the literature review, we found that 4 topics were very important. The entrepreneurship studies, of course, diaspora studies, and all related to immigrant entrepreneurs, and the most current literature about immigrant entrepreneurs that calls them diasporic transnational entrepreneurs. And also we saw that it was important to include the term consular diplomacy for this study. So basically it's a theoretical study that is trying to explain consulates as our main variable, but mixing up the literature on entrepreneurship and diaspora studies. The next slide, please. So first, I would like to say what we found regarding the literature review on entrepreneurial ecosystems. So we found that even when we don't talk about immigrants, even when we talk about people that have interest in becoming entrepreneurs, the environment plays a key role in what they want to do, how they're doing it, and whether or not they will be successful. So this is overall true, not only for immigrants, but for immigrants, it's even more important. The context or the environment is even more important because they're coming from, they're trying to immerse themselves in an environment that is quite unknown for them. So can we click again? So from all the entrepreneurship literature that we reviewed, we were very interested in looking at entrepreneurial ecosystem, because this terminology in entrepreneurship studies actually does not focus on the characteristics of the entrepreneurs. Rather, what it does is that it tries to describe a set of independent actors and factors coordinated in such a way that they enable productive entrepreneurship, which means that the entrepreneurial ecosystem actually reflect or give a lot of importance to the context. The term acknowledges that entrepreneurship does not happen in a vacuum. So it focuses on the social context and what kind of variables in the social context will enable a specific person, to become entrepreneurs. So there is not really a single definition of what variables should an entrepreneurial ecosystem take into account. There are many authors that are playing out with many variables that influence entrepreneurship. But just to name a few, I could tell you that leadership, network density, government, human capital, governmental programs to assist people that have interest in entrepreneurship, subnational jurisdictions, legislation on taxation for entrepreneurs. All of these variables are playing a role in enabling a person to become an entrepreneur and their success. So we thought that since we were studying an immigrant group in the US, we were taking out this concept in order to observe what role the consulate had in influencing the entrepreneurial ecosystem of its diaspora. Next slide, please. So then we looked at the literature review on transnational diasporic entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship to see what they had to talk about. So first of all, what we discovered was that most of the literature focuses on how these diasporic transnational entrepreneurs use the resources in their home countries to gain leverage in the host countries. So for example, we saw a lot of literature regarding Turkey, but also India, that have programs for their nationals that live abroad and that help them out with, for example, English courses. So they have certain advantage in the host country's entrepreneurial ecosystem. Then there's another set of literature that talks about home countries' diaspora policies and how they tap on the transnational entrepreneurs' resources. So, for example, some countries like Turkey, like the Philippines, they have special programs so that their diasporic entrepreneurs can invest their money and grow businesses back in their countries of origin. And then we saw that there was a third set of literature that focused on dual entrepreneurship environments and how they enhance the migrants' abilities to start successful businesses in both countries. So basically, we saw that there was a gap in the literature because we couldn't find any text or any article, any review, academic review, that would explain how countries of origin carry out diaspora policies that target entrepreneurs and whose main goal is to help them thrive in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the destination country, without this necessarily meaning that they would participate in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the countries of origin. So we really didn't find any reading or any article that could help us out to understand what were these diaspora policies that a country of origin would implement to help the diaspora members thrive in an entrepreneurial ecosystem, which was not related at all with the ecosystem in their home countries. And now can we go back one slide? I wanted just to very quickly explain to you what Mexican consulates do for its diaspora, because they have a lot of programs and there's a broad variety of what they can do. So first of all, they have an area called Community Affairs, and they target the diaspora in terms of advising them what are the educational opportunities for them, what is the cultural offer regarding Mexico for them in the US, what are their health options as well. They also help with leadership in certain communities where they detect that there are people that could be leaders of that community leaders. The consulate also targets them and tries to grow this leadership. And they run programs also for the empowerment of the communities. Then on the second section, we can see that they're describing consular protection. And this basically means traditional consular protection, as I explained earlier. This means people that have issues that with their migration status, because oftentimes this migration status is irregular. They help them out when they suffered violations of their human rights, when they are facing deportations, when they have salaries that were not paid to them, for example, when they have a work accident and the insurance is not enough or doesn't want to cover the accident for a reason. The consulate also provides for legal help for this. And they also look at civil family affairs, such as, for example, if a person was born in the US of Mexican parents. And then they have consular services, which has to do with documentation, basically the issuance of passports and other documents such as birth certificates, etc. So as I mentioned, the consulate does a lot for immigrants. There's a lot of issues also that the consulate does not target, but just to mention that Mexican consular networks are one of the most respected networks in the world, and one of the networks that will actually have a lot of services for their migrants. Now, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we are looking at the first column, which is community affairs. That's the area which takes care of, or at least tries to take care of diaspora interested in investing in a business. So can we go to the next slide? So given this context, we just target one of the programs or one of the initiatives, which is the Financial Education Week. As I mentioned, this week, which is now a big program, but it started like 1 week, was launched in 2006. And it was just thought as one entire week in which migrants were going to have access to online, but also in-present services that were available for them to manage their economic resources. That's how the financial education program was basically conceived, only for migrants to have information to take care of their economic resources. So, for example, there were banks that were interested in talking to migrants about the services that they could provide for them. There were also people who specialized in taxes, and who would talk to migrants about the importance of paying taxes and what programs they also had available for migrants who were not paying taxes before, but who had regularized their migration situation and could pay taxes now, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, long story short, this Financial Education Week was only about information provision. But then in 2012, this week got bigger, And they started to inform migrants about other issues such as financial services, personal and house loans options, safe options for sending remittances. And this week started in certain consulates in the US, but by 2021, the week extended to all Latin American consular representations, not only in the US, but in all Latin America. And then in 2014, the financial counseling window opened, which, as I mentioned, the windows are like stands that are inside the consulates that offer several services. So they started by offering comprehensive financial literacy programs for the diaspora. And also in 2017, when during Trump's presidency, we see that the financial literacy becomes also a part of an inclusion strategy launched by the consular offices, meaning that they also added information on what to do with your bank account or with your savings in terms of deportation. So they were also trying to avoid people losing all their savings due to a deportation of one member of the family, and they also added information on what they could do to protect their savings. And then in 2021, due to COVID, in LA, they launched a digital financial counseling window, and nowadays we see that in almost all consulates in the US, we have financial education available, not only in present, but online as well. So the next slide, please. So we are also seeing how this program is growing, how this Financial Education Week just started as a week that provided a lot of information, but now most of the consulates in the US have launched a program called Mexicana Emprende, which is a Mexican woman. I'm going to try to do a very poor translation of what it means, but it means Mexican woman go ahead and launch a business, something like that. So this program is especially for women, for Mexican women who have an interest in entrepreneurship. So basically, we can see here how many institutions are actually behind this program. We see that there is an education institution, which is Thunderbird. We have Dream Builder, we have ACOM, we have the Institute for Mexicans Abroad, and of course, most of the consulates that are behind this program. And this program has proven to be very successful in helping women navigate the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the US through the alliances that a lot of consulates actually can manage with the Mexican diaspora, which are already entrepreneurs, but also with other actors in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, such as banking and financial institutions, and the Latin American Chamber of Commerce is as well there, with some community colleges in terms of education regarding entrepreneurship and innovation and business innovation, et cetera, et cetera. So we see that the Mexican consulates do a lot of work because they have a lot of allies that help them out, such as all of these important stakeholders in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the Mexican diaspora interested in launching a business. So if we go to the next slide, I will talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US. So as I mentioned, immigrants have become key players in the development of new companies and also patents in the United States. So as I said, 18% of business owners are actually immigrants in the US. We see also that specifically in the case of the United States, the participation of immigrants in the economic development of subnational jurisdictions or states in the US is strategic for the economy of the country. So, as we also have seen, there are many subnational jurisdictions that are launching programs and courses that stimulate the entrepreneurial mindset of the migrant. And we see also, especially compared to Mexico, that the US institutional context is actually very encouraging in the development of new businesses. If we look at the literature on entrepreneurship and specifically Mexican entrepreneurs, we see that they have a very favorable opinion of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US compared to that of Mexico. There are many programs that help them out launch their businesses, but not only that, there are also some tax benefits. They also underline that there is less corruption for opening a business compared to Mexico, and they see that there are many other things that motivate them. So they're very favorable. The economic and the entrepreneurial ecosystem is very favorable for all entrepreneurs. So also what we notice in the literature is that non-governmental organizations are also very active in terms of courses, of development training programs for new entrepreneurs that advise them about the US business culture, that offers certifications, that offer legal requirements, etc. So we just want to underline here how there are many benefits in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US already. Yes, next. But now to actually try to address our research question, which is what is the role of consulates in influencing the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US for the Mexican diaspora, we tried to separate the domains of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in 3 big sets. We are thinking about the structural, the institutional, and the community domains of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US. So in this first slide, we have the purpose of the structural and the institutional domain. And we define, this is the Patricia's and I table. We define the structural domain as the collaboration, transparency, institutional trust, rewards for entrepreneurial behavior. And then we see how the US government programs are actually helping out or are actually influencing each of these domains. And when we talk about the US government programs, we see that the purpose of these programs regarding the entrepreneurial ecosystem of diasporas are to enable migrants to participate into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Whereas when we compare what the US government does to what the consular programs do, the consular programs are trying to empower migrants to participate in this entrepreneurial ecosystem. So moving to the structural domain of these entrepreneurial ecosystems, we see that the government programs are actually providing access to information to sustain the symbolic structure of the US being a place that is very prone to entrepreneurship and to new developments and to creation and to new patents and to new ideas. So the government programs are actually trying to enable beliefs, attitudes, and power relations to sustain the structural domain. When we see what consular programs are doing, they are providing culturally appropriate information to assist immigrants in navigating these symbolic structures that are already put into place by the US government. Then moving to the institutional domain, we define the institutional domain as financial institutions that exist already in the US, as research institutions that are constantly researching and publishing about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ecosystem. But we also look at what the business consultancy industry does regarding entrepreneurship. And when we look at at how the US government programs influence the institutional domain, we see that there are regulations and norms of accountability and certainty for finance. There are research and business consultancy, which are very favorable to immigrant entrepreneurship. And then again, when we look at what consular programs do, we see that it's very similar to what they do to how they influence the structural domain. We see that they influence it through culturally appropriate information to assist immigrants in navigating bureaucracies and institutions. Then if we could move to the next slide, we talk about the last domain of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that we have considered important, which is the community domain. What's the purpose of the community domain? Is the to have services and programs for entrepreneurships and entrepreneurs available, and to provide access to information about business, financial products, and local business features. So when we look at the government programs, we see that in terms of the community domain, they provide language courses, they provide workshops for entrepreneurs, they provide access to loans, debt management, and business finances. When we look at what consulates do in this domain, we see that they do also workshops for skills and development and cater to the migrants' needs. They also provide involvement of diaspora members and the knowledge production at the local level, networking at local level, and also provide language courses. So if we are trying to do a broad comparison of what US government's programs do in terms of influencing the entrepreneurial ecosystem as to what consular programs do, we see that the US government programs are actually trying to include migrants in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, while consular programs serve as a translator of all of these enablers in these three domains that I just described. The consular programs provide culturally appropriate information to the diasporas, but not only that, but they try to form a network among the diaspora members who have been successful and those who just want to start a business. They're trying to form networks, diasporic networks in terms of entrepreneurship. So in a very broad sense, we have named these models of approach to immigrants that we have named that the consular programs have a translation model of approach. They're translating all of these entrepreneurial ecosystem domains. They are translating them for their diaspora to be culturally sensitive. So they're not really doing something else than the US government program is, but what they're doing is they're trying to translate all these services to be accessible for their diaspora members, and they are also trying to improve the network density among the members of the Mexican diaspora. So moving to the next slide, and I'm almost done. So some of the conclusions that we had from this literature review that we did was that yes, we can say that the US entrepreneurial ecosystem is favorable to migrant populations. At least we can talk about the Mexican case. However, the Mexican migrants still face some complications as outsider of this entrepreneurial ecosystem. These complications, according to the literature, can be related to discrimination in the labor market, the lack of information to navigate bureaucracies, and insufficient English proficiency. So again, just referring to the literature, if we look at the reasons why immigrants are inserting themselves into the labor market, the literature does not always agree on why migrants are being included into the labor market through entrepreneurship, because some literature will explain that this inclusion through entrepreneurship is actually due to labor market discrimination. So migrants come with a lot of human capital, but they're not able to find a job that will actually fit their qualifications. So what they would do is they would create their own jobs through entrepreneurship. So that's one kind of explanation that we can find in the literature. But then another kind of explanation will tell you that almost it is a self-selection of people that migrate that are more prone to taking risks and that they are more creative. So this self-selection will actually lead them to entrepreneurship. So you can find both explanations, but either or, you see that they will find discrimination while they're trying to include themselves into the labor market of the countries of destination. Now, also, we suggest that Mexican consulates are translators. So given these barriers that immigrants have in terms of inserting themselves into the labor market, consulates have become important home country agents that are influencing the receiving context by playing a role in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So even though the Mexican consulates don't provide any additional service, what it does is that all the services that are being provided in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the US, they try to translate it and they try to make it more culturally sensitive to its diaspora. We also see that this implies a win-win situation. So the consulates win because they're doing their job, which is including the Mexicans abroad. It's a win-win for the diasporic entrepreneurs because it makes them the consulates make them easier for these diasporic entrepreneurs to actually insert in the US entrepreneurial ecosystem. And of course, this is a big win for the US economy since the ecosystem grows thanks to the contributions of the Mexican diasporic entrepreneurs. And if we click once more, just to see the last conclusion, Mexican consulates also fulfill their role, which is not for migrants to invest in home countries. This is a big difference with literature from other countries that indicates that migrants are actually that home countries are actually trying for their entrepreneurs to bring back some capital into their home countries from the destination countries. We see that this is not the case for Mexicans in the US. We see that the case here is that Mexican consulates are trying for their migrants to integrate into the US, and they're not necessarily thinking about how they're going to move its capital from the US to Mexico, but they're thinking about what Mexican migrants can actually do in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the US. So they're thinking about integration and not tapping into their diaspora resources as other countries do with their entrepreneurs abroad. And then moving to the next slide, we see that, well, of course, we're all interested here in diaspora diplomacy. So I have two implications drawn from this work that we're doing that can be interesting for diaspora diplomacy. And the first one is the innovation on consular protection that the Mexican consulates are providing in the consulates based in the US. So here is very important to mention that diaspora members are not only the beneficiaries of this financial endeavor, but they are also the connections through which the service provision is made possible. And this is a very interesting consular innovation for diaspora diplomacy studies, because we see that the diaspora is benefiting from this financial endeavor, but the diaspora is also participating. So when we see what the consulates do, we see that there's a lot of involvement in the Mexican diaspora that is already thriving as entrepreneurs. So there are workshops, there are meetings, there are sessions that the consuls organize for the diaspora that is starting, that is beginning to immerse themselves in this entrepreneurship ecosystem, meets the diaspora that has already been successful in creating a business. And we also see that the consulates are very good at moving their contacts in institutions, in entrepreneurship institutions that are led by Latino or by Mexican origin people, to move some resources and help the diaspora out. So as we can see here, the diaspora is a beneficiary, but is also a service provider of the consulate. And then my second conclusion would be that a future agenda may point to the interaction between consulates and entrepreneurs, and how this relationship could lead to the co-creation of the consular initiatives, since immigrants have strategic information and resources which could help consulates update their programs and strengthen their bonds with different members of the diaspora. So this basically, what we want to underline here is that Mexican consular diplomacy is innovative in a way that actually the entrepreneurial ecosystem would suggest, right? It's not the consular protection in Mexico. It's not a single model, but it's a model that is changing and that is evolving because of the diaspora involvement in these programs. The Mexican community in the US dates from a very long time, dates from the beginning of the 1900s. And the consulates are actually very good at interacting with their diaspora and making them partners and co-creating their programs along with the diaspora and involving diaspora members in the evolution of these programs. So what we suggest is that a future agenda could look into how this dialectic relationship between the diaspora and the consuls is actually generating new consular programs that cater for the interest of the Mexican government, but also for the interest of the diaspora. And I think I will leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, Carla, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And of course, you are the specialist in these studies in Mexico. You're leading this kind of research. And then so now we have time to some questions. So please go ahead. If someone want to ask something, just let me know. Raise your hand or just speak. Yeah.
And let me get my virtual hands. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi. Do I need to find my virtual hand? I'm not very bad with technology.
No, it's okay. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting presentation as regards the role of the consular offices versus the programs for diaspora or the diaspora communities. And it's quite unique because most that we know, consular offices are hardly equipped to provide the very basic service, which is, visas, passports, and that sort of stuff, or even protection of diasporas and immigrants when there is a crisis in a host country. But this is a unique case because we are talking about Mexico on the one hand and the US on the other hand. So I think it's very interesting. I have just, a couple of some observations or comments and perhaps maybe a question if I can throw in. So these are entrepreneurs. I don't know if in the economic sense we call them as entrepreneurs or small businesses, okay? Because there's a distinction between entrepreneurs who really come out with some dynamic businesses and very small scale businesses, such as having a stall of, I have seen in New York, you see Mexicans and other immigrants, they have stalls, fruit stalls. They will be slicing mangoes and putting them in a glass, in a jar, and so people walking by, they just pick up. So, I mean, that's the other definition. That part I am a bit uncomfortable, because if we lump everybody who is creating jobs for himself or herself, self-employed, as opposed to entrepreneur, which is creative businesses and expanded. So I think maybe we should be a little bit mindful of is that self-employed, and whether it is family-owned, or whether it's one person or two persons, or whether it's in the traditional sense, an enterprise. And secondly, it is true that labor market integration in most host countries is difficult, and sometimes self-employment becomes the last resort of paying your bills. In other words, you have come all the way, so you're not here to get a job. Often, when people migrate, it's like, okay, I'm going to get a good job, better than what I leave behind. Okay, but that's not the case. The labor market integration is an issue. And if we find that most Mexicans are in the diaspora, immigrants are in self-employment, that means it breaks a myth that immigrants are here to take my job in the host country. Okay, it really breaks a myth. And I think this is fantastic, and it should be really showcased that people are not here to take your jobs. They're here to contribute to the economy and to their own family and society. I mean, these are just comments. And the thing that I wanted to say was that the question I have now is government policy towards, Mexican government's policy towards migrants and diaspora is in view of the fact that it's a very large number of people and the proximity of the US to Mexico. That means the bonds and the connection between the two countries is more predictable, more regular than would be the case for certain migrants who are far away and so on. So what has informed the Mexican diaspora policy towards its people, besides protecting them? That's another matter, because they are a potential source of bringing in investment, resources, money, and of course, when they go back, sharing of some knowledge and so on. Because you said in the end, it's a win-win situation. So they are coming here not to, they are coming here not to just do a job, but also creating jobs for themselves. So what are the reasons, if it's not the reason of getting their resources? Because in the end, you said, it's not that the government wants their investment or their resources. It is to protect them and to encourage them to continue flourishing in a country which hopefully provides some opportunities. So I was a little bit uncomfortable with that conclusion, but thank you very much. Sorry for having taken so much time. And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself, Raj Badwil, and I'm one of the vice presidents at GRFDT. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj, for your comments and question. Carla, go ahead. And then Everest is going to ask you something.
Thank you very much, Raj, for your comments and your questions. Well, first, I would like to say that the definition that we used, the working definition that we used for defining entrepreneurs was anyone who is a business owner and whose business may or may not have employees. So I guess this will make you even more uncomfortable with the definition of entrepreneurs, because we're taking into account also, people that are selling mangoes in a corner in New York, which do not employ anyone but themselves and maybe her husband or his wife or kids or their own kids, right? So that's the working definition that we used, especially because a lot of diaspora members, Mexican diaspora members, are self-employed. And as you said, this is because that's the only way into labor market inclusion that they could find. But the Mexican consulates have programs for these diaspora members that are very small and that they're business owners and have like a small shop and no employees, but also they have programs for entrepreneurs that are opening, for example, jewelries. And they sell Mexican handcrafted jewels, and they employ 2 or 3 people to cater for their small store. So we range from like the very small business owner to medium businesses. That's why we decided to have this working definition, just to encompass all the variable options that the Mexican diaspora has used to launch a business. And then thank you for your comment about immigrants being in the US to actually create jobs and create labor market opportunities and enhance the entrepreneurship ecosystem. This is something that I will definitely use in the book chapter that I'm writing about this topic, because all the information that I talked about today actually breaks this myth. And what has informed the Mexican diaspora policy is a very interesting question. Just some data on it. There are around 38 million Mexicans living in the US. Most of them are not born in Mexico anymore, but are considered part of the Mexican diaspora because their parents or their grandparents were Mexican. So somehow they are considered part of the diaspora. 38 million is a lot. Now, what has informed the Mexican diaspora policy? I would say first that our diaspora is very well settled in the US. We have very large communities in small towns and also in big cities like Chicago and New York and LA. The diaspora has been settling there for ages now, and they're very organized. And we have very strong diaspora leaderships that work with consulates hand in hand, even if they're undocumented. This is regardless of the status. And I have had the opportunity to talk to a lot of consuls for interviewing them. And some of the consuls even have said this literally: diaspora sometimes doesn't need us. They are organized and they have found their way to cater for their needs. And they're only here for us to sign a document when it has to be signed by a Mexican official. But I think that the most important element that informs diaspora policy in the case of Mexico is the characteristics of our diaspora abroad. Basically meaning the temporality. We have a very old diaspora in the US and community leaderships. And I think that another important element of our diaspora policy is that consulates do not work by themselves. Every consulate in the US has a lot of allies, ranging from fiscal agents to community clinics, to community colleges, to universities. They work with banking institutions, and they have a set of allies that help them out. And the interesting thing also is that a lot of these allies are part of the Mexican diaspora. And I think this is why this model is so successful. Because as I mentioned, diaspora is not only benefiting, but is also serving as a service provider through the consulate.
Thank you, Carla. Everest, go ahead.
Hello, good morning, and thank you so much. Firstly, congratulations for this research. I think it is very important to build this kind of arguments to demonstrate that diaspora and migration has many different phases, not just to be employed in some specific kind of jobs. And my question, I have a question actually. The first one is if you recognize some specific fields of market in this entrepreneurship. I mean, specifically, I would like to know if you see something special in audiovisual industries or this kind of markets. And my second question is related to the networks. Could you recognize if Mexican migrants who entrepreneur in US support them with the Latino networks, or they have or they select Mexican networks specifically? And well, thank you so much, and I would like to contact you in the future.
Working on to try to expand and diversify the market horizons of the diaspora. And then in terms of the networks, I'm not sure if I'm going to address your question, but there is a very strong collaboration between the Mexican Consular Network and the Latino Chamber of Commerce. So even though the Mexican consulates focus on Mexican diaspora, Their allies, as I mentioned, are very diverse, and one of the allies that they work a lot with is the Latino Chamber of Commerce. And also, when we look at how entrepreneurship can actually be a good way to counteract anti-immigrant positions, there's a lot of documents that the Latino Chamber of Commerce released saying how Latinos businesses stayed open, for example, during COVID, and trying to underline how important Latino commerce was and still is after COVID for employing people and for actually expanding the US market. So yes, the networks are not only within the Mexican community, but they're expanding and taking into account other Latino entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Carla. I don't know if someone else has another question. Yeah, no, I don't see it. I have a question, Carla. So, talking about these programs in the past, for example, I wonder if you can explain a little bit deeply about this program from Women. We already had this kind of programs, 3x1, and I mean, there's a lot of research related with that, but some of the migrants were not like really agree, and many of them say that it failed, it didn't work properly. So I don't know if you can comment about something about this new program for women, and if also in your methodology you are, of course, asking to the migrants about this kind of programs, because we know as the literature, some literature are pro-consul, or also the advertisement related with this program always is like everything is successful, but on the other hand, then other comments related with how these programs work. So yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Well, first of all, I would just like to say that my objective was to look at consulates and how they influence the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the US. And this was a literature review. So unfortunately, I did not take into, we did, because I did this in collaboration with Patricia, we did not take into account migrants' voices in whether these programs were successful or not, because we were trying to look at how they influence the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the US. So we were not really interested in whether they were successful or not in terms of what the migrants were experiencing. We were more interested in taking the variables of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US. But yes, of course, it would be very interesting to know whether migrants feel that they're being helped by this program. Now, your question in the 3x1, this is just to make, because there are people from other countries that probably don't know what this is, but 3x1, it's 3x1, which is a program that was launched in the 90s in the Mexican program that tried for migrants to invest in their hometowns in Mexico. So what this program was about was for each peso, or the peso is our Mexican currency. For each peso that the migrant would invest in their community development, the municipality would invest another peso, and the state would invest another peso. So there are again, like, this is inconclusive. There are many municipalities that benefited from this because they could have, for example, decent bathrooms in schools, or they could have pavements in their streets. But there are others who would tell you that the investment was used for corruption, or they didn't even know where their money went. So like it depends on which municipality you're focusing on. It really is not conclusive. Now, another thing that I wanted to say about this Mexicana Emprende, or Mexican woman try to this is so hard to translate, but Mexicana Emprende is like trying to empower Mexican women to open a business. So this initiative is actually very interesting how it came to be an initiative, because the consulates, before this initiative, the consulates opened a window for women. So they opened a special space for Mexican women in the consulates to cater for special needs that they were seeing that women were needing in the US. Like, for example, they detected a lot of domestic violence. They detected a lot of alcohol abuse in the male diaspora that became domestic violence. They detected that a lot of Mexican women actually wanted to work, but they had kids and they had no one to take care of their kids, and so on. So they decided to launch this program, Mexicana Emprende, to try to make women more economic, independent of their male partners. And a lot of women could do a lot of things, like, for example, cook, but not only cook, but make jewelry, or some other kinds of handcrafts. So this is why this program came into light, right? They were detecting this problem of Mexican women being economically dependent to their partners, and they kind of tried it to make it otherwise. Whether it's working or not, it's an excellent question that would have to be addressed by interviewing migrants themselves. But I kind of tried to focus on these initiatives and the economic ecosystem of the US.
Okay, Carla, thank you very much for your answer. And then we have in the chat a question and a comment, and I'm gonna read it now. Thanks a lot for your presentation. This is Mehedi Hassan. I'm a student of European Master in Migration and Intercultural Relation. My question is a bit off topic. I'm writing my thesis on the making of Bangladeshi migrant entrepreneurship in Rome. I have noticed that those who are selling Italian products are more integrated into the Italian society compared to the entrepreneurs who sell end products. The integration is basically business-oriented. The number of Bangladeshi is increasing, so we can also see the existence of Bangla Town, where more Bangladeshi businessmen are entering and the Italian businessmen are leaving. How healthy is the practice for the local community? If this is not a healthy practice, then how should the host countries' migration policy govern the migrant entrepreneurs? Thank you very much, Mehedi, for your question. Go ahead, Carla.
And thank you very much, Mehedi. I think it's really original, the research that you're doing about Bangladeshi migrant entrepreneurship in Rome. It's very interesting, and maybe, I don't know if there's a lot of literature, but not so much known to me. So it's a hard question to answer, because I don't know if they're healthy for the local community as such. I mean, I don't have like a yes or no answer, but I can give you some hints on what we've observed in the case of Mexicans in the US. So, as I said, the Mexicans in the US are a very well settled diaspora, and we've been there for forever, even before the 1900s. So a lot of this community, or a lot of these entrepreneurs, what they do is that they start their business in their communities, right? So, for example, if you go to New York, you will see a lot of Mexican stores that specialize in dresses for one cultural party that we have in Mexico, which is the quinceañeras, like a sweet 16 thing that they do in the US. We do it when girls turn 15. in a lot of municipalities, they throw them a big party to kind of present them to society. They're 15 now and they are entering adolescence. So they want to introduce the women to society, and they make these special dresses for quinceañeras. And we see this in New York. We see that in Brooklyn, there's like 2 or 3 streets that are full of quinceañera stores, and there are also photographers that specialize in taking pictures of quinceañeras and making the videos to send back to Mexico and so on. But I would say that this is very common in the case of Mexico due to the settlement of the diaspora. This is very common to see, and there are many communities that have been built around the Mexican identity. So these businesses are actually not only a way for migrants to integrate into the labor market, but to cater for a big demand. There is demand for these services because a lot of people of Mexican origin actually live there. So I think that this also relates to the integration model that each country has. So the US is known for having a laissez-faire model, right? Like they don't do anything to integrate migrants. Migrants just either they integrate or not. But if you talk about Italy, it's a different case because the Italian government does have an immigration and an integration policy. So I guess you could get this to the macro level of seeing how governments manage integration and how this permeates into communities and subnational jurisdictions. In the US, since there's no rules, since there's no integration program, then I think you would have different answers if you compare this to the Bangladeshi migrants in Rome. Because of the diaspora as well, you know, I don't know a lot about Bangladeshis in Rome, but I probably it's very different to the characteristics that we Mexicans have in the US.
Thank you, Carla, very much for your answer. Camelia has another question. Go ahead, and after, if Vinod Kadria has a question or a comment, yeah, go ahead, Camelia.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, I really enjoyed your presentation and this hearing an example of diaspora diplomacy that works. I think we learn a lot from these cases. And the question was about entrepreneurial skills. I was wondering, apart from education, these are resiliency of migrants, or what characterizes a person who's starting their own business due to maybe a failure on the job market. Like I was wondering if you included questions about their level of satisfaction with their current condition. Are they happy with what they achieved or not? And are they maybe grateful to the Mexican government who supported them? And I don't know if Professor Vinod Kadria, who has worked on the topic, may have also a question or comment.
Let me unmute. Shall I join Camelia now, or Carla would like to respond first, and then I can come in?
Well, mine would be a very quick response because we did not do any service. We just looked at the literature and we compared it with the consular programs and some great literature as well on Mexican consuls. But I cannot really answer because we did not include any service on the study.
Okay, thanks.
Well, if I can come in now. Thank you, Aaron, for inviting me. And just to introduce myself, I happen to be the president of the GRFDT. I have had long interaction with students in my university career, and it was a treat listening to Carla. Her articulation and her presentation was crystal clear. So that's something I think is a skill that I will envy, if I can say so. Having said that, I think you had a lot of information packed into your presentation. And then you also shared a few issues, I think, on which we, the academic community, would like to build upon, because your information sharing would be very handy for the migrants and the diasporas, and not only the Mexican diasporas, but also diasporas across the world, the Bangladeshi diaspora or the Indian diaspora and so on. Although these diasporas are completely different from each other, there is a whole variety. I only would like to flag two issues which have stuck with me, and you mentioned that productive entrepreneurship. You mentioned about productivity enhancement because of the consular help or consular services and so on. Of course, I'm not going into what are the consular practices. My colleague Raj had also mentioned about in terms of visas and passports, and where do the passports are served to the country's own people and visas to the aliens. So self and the other, and where is the dividing line? Are the consulates not only, and I'm not meaning about the Mexican consulates, but consulates as a category, how friendly are they to the others, and how favorable are to their own country people, or even to own country people, they may not be that friendly at times because they belong to a different class by themselves, whereas people who are coming for services cut across a whole categories of people. But leaving that aside, in terms of enhancement of productivity, if we look at that, then it just take country of origin and the country of destination. How do we measure? What is the scale of measurement of this productivity? Because as you see, even in your own example of Mexico versus United States, the income levels are so different and the consumption patterns are so different. Purchasing power is so different of their currencies and so on. Remittances are another question. But how do we compare the productivities across these spaces of the diaspora, of the migrant, of the home people, and the host people? That is one issue that we all need to worry about. And from this question, another which follows is when you say win, 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 triple win situation. I think we all win, but what we have to worry is that winning is not homogeneous. Winning is very much heterogeneous in terms of who wins how much. We all may be winning, but I may be winning 100 times than yourself or somebody else. And that, I think, is actual question that we need to, are we going to be satisfied with 10% of the win and leaving 90% to our adversaries? That question is very important, and particularly in the context of the situations that we look at now. Let me give you an example from India. Post-COVID-19, who is going out from India? Is the wealthy class, the top cream class who have a lot of resources. Rather than investing in India, and let us say COVID is an indicator of climate change, broadly speaking. If climate change is pushing these people out of the country of origin, then they are going to invest not anymore in their own country. They are going to invest in other countries. That is leading to a wealth drain, not only knowledge drain, which professionals take with them, but wealth drain. And that takes us back into the era of colonialism, of imperialism. And that's where, because India's brain drain or wealth drain had started in the 19th or 18th century when Dadabhai Naoroji is a name who was a member of the British Parliament, but he actually made a statement in the British Parliament that India is losing its wealth because wealth was being drained out. And now the wealth is going along with the capitalist class, which is migrating out of their countries of origin because of climate change. You look at Bangalore, the India Silicon Valley, and look at United States, what is happening. So I'm not going to go on elaborating, but just trying to throw some issues which probably will perhaps evoke your response, at the same time provoke you. Thank you.
Carla, do you want to say something?
Yes, well, thank you very much. This has definitely provoked a lot of reactions, and I have a lot to think about. Thank you very much for that. So first of all, I would say that consulates as a category is a very interesting topic. When we look at consular diplomacy literature, we see that there is a big difference on what is considered consular diplomacy by the global norths, such as the European Union, for example, or Canada. When we look at the very same case of the US operating consular diplomacy abroad, it's very different as to when we look at what consular diplomacy is for countries such as India, such as Turkey, such as the Philippines, and ourselves, such as Mexico. So consulates as a category is very different. Of course, we need to find a consensus on what we're going to understand under consulates as a category, but it is different in terms of the operational capacities of each country and the characteristics of the diaspora. But to respond to your question, we had a survey that I did not use for this study because it was a different study, but we did have a survey and we interviewed around 1,520-something people that used consular services in the US in 5 selected cities. And in each and every one of the survey, people had complaints about how they were being treated in the consulate. So like, this is just to tell you that the consulates, they do a very amazing job in terms of service provision because they have a lot of services available for immigrants. But in terms of client satisfaction, it might be dubious because of the way they're treated, right? And I totally agree with you. Consular officials are a very different social class when compared to most of the migrants who use consular services, which are usually undocumented. And this is why I was very interested in looking at entrepreneurs and the use of consular services, because when we first started the research, we kind of did this mistake, this conceptual mistake, and we kind of we thought that a lot of Mexican entrepreneurs in the US would be highly skilled migrants, which wasn't the case. When we looked at statistics, we saw that our diaspora is very heterogeneous. So it's very diverse. So we had a lot of immigrant entrepreneurs who were very highly skilled, which are actually also members of Silicon Valley. But we also saw that there were many others who were unskilled and still were entrepreneurs and still were successful. So I think that in the case of Mexico and in your question of who wins, I think that I might have been very, or I might not have added the complexity needed for this response. Of course, everyone wins, but who wins more, right? And I think that in this particular case, as Camelia said, our consular diplomacy is very successful, and I think that the winner here, the big winner here, is the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the US, because we're enabling more and more migrants to be part of this entrepreneurial ecosystem, and I think that the migrants are also winning themselves, right? Because it's not as you mentioned, the case of India, which I'm completely ignorant about. But in the case of Mexico, we have entrepreneurs which are very diverse, right? And they're also benefiting from this training and these workshops and this closeness to Mexican entrepreneurs who have thrived. So I think that, yes, we could say that the bigger winner here is the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the US, But we can also say that our diaspora is also a winner, maybe less of a winner, second or third place, but still, you know, it benefits from these services. We can't hear you, Aaron.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Carla and Vinod. So I think if there's not another question, Camelia, do you want to close or Vinod close the session?
I'd like to thank you, Carla, for being with us, for sharing your research, and of course, thank the public and my colleagues from GRFDT. And of course, invite you to our next session. We don't have a date yet, but please keep checking our website and our networks. And well, have a nice night in India and good morning in Mexico. And we were really happy to have you here. This event is organized by the Center for Research on North America at the National Autonomous University of Mexico and the GRFDT, the Global Research Forum on Diasporas and Transnationalism, which has experts in the Americas and back in India and all over the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Good day.
Thank you.